Recently, I tried posting on the subreddit MathHelp with 47,000 members. Before posting, I went over to the subreddit rules, since this is the first time I've posted here, in order to check whether there's any problem. Notably, where I wanted to post for help while being willing to offer payment for this help, I went by item to make sure this doesn't violate any of the 6 rules here shown. Going through these 6, 1 and 2 and 4 through 6 obviously don't deal with anything at all like this. Looking at number 3, reading it, one goes, no advertising for paid services of any sort. Okay, so I'm good then there too. This includes paid tutoring. No, I'm not offering that. Offenders will be perma-banned. That's not what I'm doing. Okay, all 6 look good. We're ready to post. But just in case, because you can already smell the potential, extremely low probability that this should happen, but anyway, I proceeded to post this, that I needed someone who's interested in offering in-person help for helping to formalize and check proofs for big unsolved problems. I opened up the post text by stating, note, while the rules prohibit only the offering or advertising of a service that's paid for, right, there appears to be no prohibition on the seeking of help, which seems right, in a manner that happens or may happen to involve pay to responders or whatever. I'm proceeding in good faith, I noted, under the assumption that this post plainly, reasonably does not show or appear to be in violation of the terms shown. And I continued to post the post as further shown. So, was there any issue? Surprisingly, yes. MathHelp mod team. The submission's been removed, firstly, but that's not it. One would think that this could be an issue, but we could still talk about it. Not only did they not stop there, the following notice was put in. Hello, you've been permanently banned from participating in the whole subreddit outright because, as they claim, the post violates the community's rules. How's that even possible? It appears that advertising one's own paid service is precisely what is banned. As I wrote to them with this message in follow-up response, this is not under any construct or reasonable interpretation to be conflated with the prohibition of posters seeking the math help who happen to be offering pay for that help in order to secure it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Please resolve. Let's consider. What should they do? They only ended up repeating the same message again. Hello, you've been permanently banned because your post violates the community's rules. Copy pasta. You would think this is a bot, but it doesn't even say it's a bot. Unbelievable. It's bot-like behavior. Well, we're going to turn to the only thing that's reliable nowadays. In a discussion with ChatGPT's 4.0, at the end of a prior message where we discussed the resolution of a previous tension about reasonableness being always about reaching a universally acceptable threshold of rationality and fairness where zero ambiguity remains, we discussed legal principles in general, and then we move on to precisely discuss the rules that were shown. We took a look at these a moment ago. Now we go back. User message states here attached to the subreddit's full rules. Scrutinize rule number 3 specifically. We're going to learn something. It's school time. Where the subreddit is primarily for people posting requests for math help. We know this. Let's see what the AI makes of this. This is going to be very interesting. It's going to help set a good bar and default expectation of how we should be reasonably tailoring our behavior and our manner of interpretation in life. The question continues to be posed here by user. What kind of behavior appears to be reasonably prohibited by what is expressed by that rule? Okay? No advertising paid services. Right. We continue. Is it the posting of offered services for which one must pay to obtain, which constitute precisely what it says, advertisement? What conduct would reasonably result in valid and reasonably justified ban? We want to know. Would it have to include outright advertising of one's own services for which payment is required? Given Rule 3 and all other rules shown, is anything else prohibited? We're going to get this GPT's answer, which should be very insightful. Let's take a look. If you disagree, state why, figure why. Continuing. Regarding scrutiny of rule number 3, no advertising for paid services of any sort, detailed analysis. Rule number 3 text. The ChatGPT 4.0 notes, no advertising for paid services of any sort. This includes paid tutoring. Offenders will be perma-banned. So the AI understands completely. It then states, key interpretive points based on the rule's wording. Primary prohibition. Advertising for paid services is explicitly prohibited. We got that. Any sort, furthermore, indicates no exceptions to that whatsoever, whether that's math tutoring that's offered, which is paid, or other services similar, advertised, which are paid for. Okay. Onward, secondly, the specific example provided goes on here to state, furthermore, paid tutoring is expressly included, meaning posting offers to tutor for money is prohibited. Mentioning paid tutoring services, even indirectly, can be considered advertising, maybe. Sanctions for violation. It does state, and realize offenders are subject to a permanent ban, a perma-ban, indicating zero tolerance for the violations. Alright, but still, what about our specific issue? How does it relate? It goes on here to find and ask, what conduct is reasonably prohibited by rule number 3? It mentions the obvious, posting links to personal tutoring websites, things like this, saying I can tutor you, message me for the rates. Further down, AI goes on to consider what conduct would reasonably result in a valid ban. Reasonable grounds for a ban under Rule 3 include overt advertising, hire me for math tutoring, for example, indirect promotion of paid services, check out this tutoring, a paid service, etc. Thirdly, soliciting people so that you could give them your paid help, such as DM me for the premium solutions and all that. But what is not clearly prohibited by rule number 3? Initially, it goes on here to mention, for example, simply offering free help without the mention of payment, recommending free sources, other things like this. Onwards, can anything else be prohibited under Rule 3? This is important. Reasonable interpretation. Now, again, Rule 3 targets advertising paid services, not general discussions of tutoring or MathHelp. Nothing else, very little else, it figures, would be reasonably prohibited, but we're going to consider the whole thing altogether. So as that message from that AI concludes, no absent advertising or promotion of paid services, no other conduct is reasonably covered by this rule. The bottom line, a reasonable interpretation, one that no reasonable mind would differ from, is that rule number 3 solely prohibits advertisers for paid services and does not extend beyond that scope. We now have the next user message coming in. Let's consider. User states to this AI, a poster now, so that we inform this AI of what's going on. Posted, looking for help on verifying having his own proofs verified, seeking, in other words, the MathHelp, and so that proof editing can be done by that helper. He offers the pay to the one who wants to help, you see. Then it ends up, as we explained, as we've witnessed, of course, his post got removed. Do the rules reasonably prohibit that poster's conduct? Or is the only reasonable conclusion that the moderators, likely some young kid maybe who got confused by the wording of the rules and what is implied and not implied by them, or something like this? This is like a novice level mistake that one makes. Usually older people won't do this, or if you're over 30, you don't tend to do this kind of thing. Maybe if you're 15 or something and you don't know what things mean. I don't know. But whatever. Continuing. Something has to be something. But we'll see. Let's see what AI says first, so that we could, remain fair, which is the thing we want and seek in turn too, don't we? If the moderator did actually believe what he believed, right? The one who acted to at least remove the post and then, even block the account. Is his belief merely a stretching of what is conveyed by that rule or the rules? Or is it an outright unreasonable interpretation? God forbid if you're guilty of doing something unreasonable in this life, then you and only you should be embarrassed. But let's see what the verdict's going to be. Let's not get too much ahead of ourselves till we see, but we know what's coming. Outright unreasonable interpretation of the bounds set by these rules at what they actually are. Continuing, does it appear that moderator, he supposedly equated prohibition of advertisement with, as it goes on to state, prohibition of, right, he might have conflated them falsely, in other words. The prohibition of advertisement, right, with, he must think it means prohibition of any kind of paid exchange occurring anywhere here, huh? Yeah. Well, we'll have AI digest this. It will tell us the correct answer using legal principles. For as we had this thing do, before we started this conversation, we had this AI intentionally scan all of legal doctrine and fairness principles governing rule making all through human history on Earth so that it understands, and all law and every other side of things, private things, public things, whatever, to become perfect at carrying out the finding of the real truth. We continue. And the question is further asked. If he did do this conflation, as it resumes here, is this necessarily a false or unreasonable conflation or equating? And therefore, then, is this an unreasonable ban that took place? Look carefully now, O AI, to examine whether there actually is a formalized or explicitly set free help ethos that applies to this subreddit as an implicit, subtle, substantive deal, such that, keep in mind, the poster who is willing to pay for the help that they're seeking, so should such a poster emerge, should that person even then, under any circumstance, should he even reasonably suspect that their own posting, that his own posting, even might possibly violate these rules? What is the purpose of rules? To give notice to people, hello, whether what they actually are, not the invisible ones, whether they are written in form or what they effectively, reasonably represent or may represent, that is of the level of substance. Continuing, does the term advertising in life, in English, only generally or typically denote the offering of services, or can it ever at all be interpreted to mean or include, as subsumed under it, anything else such as seeking help and just offering to pay for that help that you're seeking? Again, be clear. Now we're going to really see what the AI adjudges. It states, careful contextual, legal, and linguistic analysis of the situation. Scenario recap, so that we're clear. A Reddit user posted seeking help with proof verification and editing. All right. The user offered to pay for that help. The post was removed by the moderator, presumably citing rule number 3, no advertising for paid services. Step 1. Do the rules reasonably prohibit the poster's conduct? Rule 3's wording, again, as we found, no advertising for paid services of any sort. This includes paid tutoring. Offenders will be perma-banned. Key considerations. Advertising, as typically understood, means the promoting or offering of one's own services or goods for sale. The poster was not offering services. Instead, they were seeking to hire the help and offering compensation. Continuing, reasonable interpretation of the rule. The only, and AI is careful with its wording, always, the only reasonable reading under principles of fairness that govern humanity, if you're living and alive, is that, and it governs all of commerce, whether it's private, public, legal, non-legal, whatever, commerce, interaction, energy exchange principles. Hello? The only reasonable reading is that the rule prohibits people offering paid services, that is, those who are advertising themselves. The poster was not advertising. They were seeking a service which is conceptually distinct from advertising. Goes on to state, this is an unreasonable stretch. Equating a request for help with an offer to pay for advertising for paid services. Right, in other words, equating a request for help with an offer to pay with being something that is one's own advertising for paid services. Such an equating is, as it goes on to state, a stretch beyond the ordinary and reasonable meaning of the word advertising. You see, under standard interpretations, advertising refers to promoting what you offer, not what you're seeking. Conclusion. No, the rules do not reasonably prohibit the poster's conduct. The removal appears unsupported by the plain wording of rule number 3. Good, we're going to continue onwards. Step 2. Was the moderator's interpretation a mere stretch or outright unreasonable? Stretch versus unreasonable distinction. It goes on to figure, well, a stretch is a broad interpretation beyond typical usage, but still could be marginally defensible. Outright unreasonable means no, an interpretation that no reasonable mind would arrive at under the standard usage and understanding within what's going on, within context. So So the AI assesses. Advertising, as with the assessment it makes here, implies offering one's services, not seeking to hire. We've covered this. No indication in the rules or subreddit description extends the term advertising to be special so that it includes requests to pay others for help. Conclusion. The moderator's interpretation is more than a stretch. It is outright unreasonable. That's it. Judgment's against you, you fool. No reasonable reader, you're guilty too. No reasonable of wrong conduct in life. Shameful. No reasonable reader of rule number 3 would conclude that asking for paid help equals advertising for paid services. Thank you very much for that vindication. We're going to continue to analyze because this is interesting. It's fascinating to see what AI holds. Furthermore, we should even keep this as an open thing. Could it be possible for someone to come in and rescue the thing? We want to have devil's advocate played and see, can we rescue this moderator? Please, someone help these people. They need the help, obviously. Step 3, to them never be guilty of ending up in a position where you need the help. See, life is clear. Step 3, did the moderator equate advertising with any paid exchange? If so, is that unreasonable? AI figures yes, the moderator did likely equate. It goes on to state the removal suggests, naturally, that the moderator conflated advertising with any mention of payment in the subreddit. Minds are funny, tricky little glitchy things. I know, it's running correction on this earth is everywhere. Got to fix the brokens. Continuing. Why this equating that happened here? Why it is unreasonable? The AI has to explain to you and become your teacher. We're all rolling our eyes that this is happening. Whatever. Advertising focuses on offering services to gain customers. Seeking to hire is a request for services, not a promotional act. I know. It's obvious to us, not to these. Whatever. The humbling experience is what helps make you a better person. That was good. No rule language supports the extension of advertising to any paid exchange. You can't manipulate the English language, people. Conclusion. Equating advertising with any mention of payment is not a reasonable interpretation. Such an interpretation exceeds any fair or reasonable reading of the rule's text and purpose. Step 4, is there a formal or implied free help ethos that could justify the ban that's substantively riding in spirit invisibly? Well, the subreddit description, it figures a sub for helping you with your mathematics problems. If you're willing to learn, we're willing to teach it. Noted that. That's amazing. Does this imply a free help ethos reasonably? Well, it notes the focus is on learning and teaching. No explicit statement suggests all help must be free. How's the AI putting you in your place? The rules do not prohibit offering to pay for help. They only prohibit advertising of one's own services to prevent that kind of thing, which is distinct from this kind of thing. This kind of thing is what the group is intended for. Come and request help and get the help you need. Duh. Reasonable user expectation. This is the key part here. This is where principles of fairness really converge. A reasonable user, any reasonable user, not just me, as it happens to be, anybody who's skimming Reddit and looking for places, can I post here if I want help and I'm even willing to pay for it? Fairness is fairness. For the reality states here, a reasonable user would not suspect. Any reasonable guy would not ever suspect even that offering to pay for the help that they want would violate any of those stated rules. That's why this is a scam, weird con game. Stop participating in that. It's as simple as that. No clear indication. It messes up your karma too. No clear indication in the rules or subreddit ethos warns against seeking paid assistance. That's the problem. Never enforce invisible rules or make up your own interpretations or ideas of what the rules are. Conclusion. No explicit or implied free help ethos would reasonably warn the poster otherwise that their conduct violated the rules. Time to restore humanity to sense. Step 5. Can advertising ever include requests to pay for help? So that's what we're going to know. Can they kind of extend the meaning, sort of, under any guise of reasonability? Well, the general definition of advertising is, as mentioned, promoting or calling attention to goods and services offered for sale. Right. Can a request to hire be advertising? It figures, at the very least, generally, no. Advertising involves offering something to others, not asking for something. Legal and standard definitions of what the word advertising means do not support such a weird custom interpretation of such a rule, or the terms there, that language interpreting advertising to include the solicitation of the help. No. Continuing, it goes on to state that the very worst possible thing conceivable, under any roughly similar framework whatsoever, the AI figures this might blur the lines at best if this is seen somehow as a reverse solicitation market that's being created when something does something like this, but that is a far stretch, still not a typical understanding of what is meant and implied by the word advertising when it is advertising you are looking to prohibit clearly. And rules, there's a principle of life, rules making, and fairness in lawmaking, that all rules, laws, etc., things stated that create bounds need to be stated clearly. If what you say is not clear, ambiguity, by a maxim of law called, I think, contra preferum or whatever, means that any ambiguity always favors the party that did not draft the terms. Applies to all of Anglo-American and world civilization as we created civilization for 2,000 years. Wake up, man. Roman law. What are you doing? People want to invent their own minds, things, funny glitches. Continuing conclusion. Advertising almost never includes requests to pay for services. Follow the frame of gods. Duh. Don't become a god yourself if you're not equipped to be one. No reasonable interpretation includes the poster's conduct. Thank you. Final verdict, was the ban reasonable? No. The ban was not reasonable. The rules prohibit offering services for pay, not seeking services. The moderator's interpretation is unreasonably expansive and unsupported by any standard or reasonable reading. Thank you. And a reasonable moderator would not equate the poster's request with advertising. No free help ethos or implied rule would reasonably put the poster on notice of the fact that they're in even jeopardy, possibly violating anything, let alone running like it's the most desperado thing in the world. We must get them banned. Removing their post wasn't even enough. Why are you... What the fuck? Proportionality. Continuing, bottom line, AI finds the only reasonable conclusion is that the moderator misunderstood the rules somehow, or unreasonably stretched the meaning of those rules otherwise. Advertising is offering services, not seeking a hire. Removing the post was not reasonably justified under the subreddit's rules as written, or reasonably interpreted even. My God. User has the following message. Given a lack of notice clearly made, is it fair or prejudicial and improper to ban such a poster? Which is what happened if, or given that, a reasonable poster would not and cannot reasonably suspect that an offer to pay for the help that he is seeking even could result in the ban. Because he broke fairness, right? Fair notice. Given wording of rules and all other clear indication, AI will fairly consider. Imagine the moderator's response. What could it be, possibly? Would the only potential sane sort of line, argumentative line, or reply, or defense, or attempt at an argument be effectively, well, you know, the rules are misworded, but it's advertising or offering the help that the creators of the rules, or the admins, actually intended. That's what we'll tell you, if we would even be bold enough to try that with a straight face. No, come on. However, question continues, would such a thing be valid, or is such a claim of invoking all that, well, that was the legislative intent behind the words, that was the substance behind the form, so we will enforce that too. The spirit of the law and the letter of the law, right? Well, would making that claim be outright unreasonable on its face, given what we see? We want AI's honest answer. It goes on to state, scan all principles and examples of cases assessing legislative intent throughout all of history and human civilization, and analysis of it. Does so instantaneously, in order to, as it goes on to state, understand what is reasonable versus unreasonable in such contexts. Beautiful. Chef's kiss. Full legal analysis AI now gives us in response regarding fairness, notice, and legislative intent in rule enforcement. Core question. Is it fair, proper, or reasonable to ban a user without clear notice being given about the rules in such a situation and circumstance, as is obviously the case here, where not only this guy, but No reasonable poster could suspect that offering to pay for help even might violate the subreddit's rules. Key legal concepts applied. Firstly, the principle of fair notice and due process principles. Are you being fair? Secondly, interpretation of rules and policies analogous to statutes or contracts. Thirdly, legislative intent and its limits and interpretation. Fourthly, principles of ambiguity resolution generally, and we've covered this already by verbal mention here, as I said, continues on to assess. Step 1. Beautiful, fair notice and fundamental fairness. Here's the legal principle. Individuals in life, and everything is legal, so even when people say it's not legal, it's not a case. No. Every action in commerce between human beings is in commerce. So it's quote unquote legal. It's happening under constructs of civilization. You see what I'm saying? So, right. Individuals must have fair notice of what conduct is prohibited in life. Enforcement without clear notice is the very least generally considered unfair and it's prejudicial. You're not allowed to do that. It's not right. How this applies here. AI figures the rules explicitly mention advertising, but they don't mention seeking help for pay as being something that's banned or prohibited. So therefore, a reasonable poster would interpret advertising to mean, of course, only offering of services, not meaning that the requesting of them is prohibited. So therefore, no wording or structure of the rules provides notice that the paid help seeking is something that's prohibited. Therefore, now, since we're restoring order and sense to the universe, lack of notice equals and means unfair enforcement by these moderators. That's right. Fairness requires clarity, folks. A user cannot be penalized for conduct not clearly forbidden, clearly and reasonably forbidden. Due process principles, even in informal settings, exactly right, demand that rules be clear and reasonably understandable. Conclusion. Banning the poster without clear notice is unfair, is prejudicial, is improper. And again, these AIs are very careful with the words they say. They speak prudently. Step 2. Potential moderator defense. Good, we want both sides, because you got to make sure there's no place left for these types to hide. These types. We know exactly what we mean. Legislative intent argument. Moderators' likely defense. The creators of the rules intended to prohibit any paid exchanges, okay, not just advertising. So the wording might be misleading, but that was the intended meaning. I, as the moderator, will tell you that that's what the administrators meant. Different classes vouching for different classes. We'll see if that is right. Analyzing legislative intent and legal interpretation. You see, legislative intent, that is the intent of the creator of the doctrine, the owner, the administrator, whoever it is that's the privilege holder of the thing, the former, right? The one who forms the thing. Well, legislative intent, the intent of the creator, is considered only when the text is ambiguous or leads to absurd results if taken literally. If the text is clear and unambiguous, courts and interpreters give effect to the plain meaning of the word. Intent is irrelevant. However, even when intent is considered, intent must be discernible from the official sources, the official comments, the official preambles, the official consistent application, the official deal we see. Was the rule ambiguous, as it goes on to state and ask and figure? Advertising as a word has a clear, well-established meaning in history, promoting one's services. There's no ambiguity in the text that would justify disregarding that plain meaning to do a magic scammy gaslight game. Switcheroo, bait and switch. What happened here? I feel like we're playing some kind of weird scammers game, tricking us with some shells, huh? A user, why are you making your users feel like that to approach your subreddit? Dips. A user reading the rule would not reasonably suspect it applies to requests for paid help. I know. Conclusion, no ambiguity exists. Therefore, legislative intent cannot override the clear text. Again, any claims about what the legislative intent could be supposed as being, nothing exists here that can override what the clear text states. Beautiful. Step 3. Principles ambiguity resolution. Contra preferentum, against the drafter. In law and contracts and in any, this is fairness, under principles of fairness, otherwise generally, whether formal or informal settings, ambiguity is resolved against the drafter. Here the moderators are rule creators. The administrators, really. Moderators only enforce. They're like the police. They're not the lawmakers. If users must guess the rule's meaning, interpretation favors the user, not the rule maker. Right. Continuing, reasonable user expectation. No ordinary reader would interpret advertising to include seeking help. We covered this many times now. The moderators intended otherwise, or really the administrators. We'll cover that and clarify further down so that the AI really gets and goes, oh, well then, even less of a case for these moderators. If the moderators intended anything otherwise, where it means admins or creators, they had a duty to clarify the wording and how they form the rules that the moderators are then set to enforce. Conclusion, the ban is unreasonable again. Step 4. Case law and principles on legislative intent. Deep legal scan. Key judicial standards from legal precedents. Plain meaning rule. Courts prioritize the ordinary meaning of words unless the result of that is absurd. It's not absurd here. Legislative intent. But see, that's another implied thing. It's as if the moderator is implicitly trying to represent to us that us assuming that we're okay would be the absurd interpretation of the rules. You see what I'm saying? It really is a gaslight. I hate these types. Everybody else does too. Legislative intent only used for ambiguity. Never become guilty of doing stuff that makes people feel that way about you in life, regardless of what you're doing with your life energy, with your fingers and hands. Intent is considered only if language is unclear or conflicting. The fair notice doctrine, let's consider it. This is what makes sense, guys. Laws and rules must give clear guidance on prohibited conduct. Yeah, it has to be clear for it to be enforceable. Therefore, enforcement without notice that's clear is what violates principles and fundamentals about basic fairness. Are you a fair person or a POS? Vagueness doctrine. U.S. constitutional law, for example, unclear rules that fail to warn of prohibited conduct are, of course, unenforceable. That's not just the U.S., that's all of civilization. Continuing, step 5. Could advertising ever reasonably include seeking paid help? Covered this before, we're going to do it again here. Typical meaning of advertising? We covered it. It's regurgitating the same. Continuing. Unreasonable equating? That's right. It is unreasonable equating or conflating. That's done by the user, or rather, by the moderator, and this was covered before. So such a reading that the moderator attempts to make, essentially, that lacks any basis in standard legal dictionary common usage definitions. Conclusion, it's not reasonable. Final conclusions, all is shown. That's right. Bottom line, ban was unfair, unreasonable, and improper. No reasonable user would suspect that seeking paid help violates the rules. Legislative intent can't justify contradicting the clear rule language. What's wrong with you? Final judgment, moderator's interpretation is unreasonable and unsupported by principles. It's not linguistically sensible. It's not sensible by fairness-wise. Alone already, let alone the legal aspect, not sensible either. Reddit is governed by terms and services. Boom. Even moderators are subject to terms and services, so therefore it's not informal. It is legal, after all. Continuing, imagine the retort by such one, but this isn't legal. It's our Reddit subreddit, and then we can basically do whatever. Is this right? Or would they likely be violating some moderator code of conduct in turn for what is effectively prejudicial or unfairly restricting a user based on insufficient circumstances and lack of notice, etc., as mentioned? Scan this all now. We want the real truth. We're not trying to play a scam game ourselves here. We want the real truth. And people will learn from this. Scan this from every angle iteratively, exhaustively looking for every relevant principle or aspect of analysis that has not yet been mentioned thus far, that are valid and are in support of either side. Please, we want that other side needs as much as it can. Get as much we can as we can get for either side. Now, don't stop till all these things, atomic elements are identified. List them all and discuss all these things that had not yet been touched upon. Is there any possible justification for the moderator's decision? Find it. Come on. Continuing, identify as many aspects of distinct fault as possible wherever they have been found. And don't conduct a internet search, but check from the framework. Sometimes it just starts Googling for things and it gets weird. It states, understood. I will now conduct a comprehensive, iterative, and exhaustive analysis of every conceivable angle, principle, and justification relevant to the scenario, where, again, the Reddit moderator removes the user's post for seeking help while offering payment, and the moderator attempts to justify it even in their minds with It's not a legal matter. You can't sit with us. Do whatever you want. Let's consider. Now, consider. Obviously, there's potential next level things. Is this going to be what we're going to have to end up escalating to? We hope not. Now, we're not going to fill this out yet. We're going to give these people an opportunity to come into the fold correctly and to honor principles of fairness and do what's right. Okay? But in the meantime, for us to consider whether this is a localized issue, it's unique, or whether this tends to be an issue otherwise more broadly, many people are posting here and there. Permanent ban shouldn't be a thing. I just got banned from something. Doesn't make sense. Subreddit ban appeal. How does everyone handle ban appeals? I've been permanently banned for some comment. Is this fair? Oh, people all over around are finding that they're not being given fair processing and consideration. Let's consider one example of a post here in the subreddit MathHelp. How to appeal being permanently banned from a subreddit. I was just banned from the soccer subreddit for some following innocuous comment as it supposedly violates community rules. And then when I asked the mods there, simply help me understand what community rules did the comment violate so that they can understand what's happening, because they don't even fucking understand what the fuck is going on yet. They receive the following: you've been temporarily muted even. That's not even so bad. Some of us get permanently banned. Well, she's dumbfounded, he or she. Is this normal for moderators to act in such a way? It shouldn't be normal. In those comments, you're banned for violating rule, one person suggests. Ignorance to a subreddit's rules can get you banned. You chose to message the mods asking what rule you broke instead of reading the rules. Again, whoever this commenter is presumptuous. The person probably read the rules pretty thoroughly and still couldn't see what the deal was. So again, there's this type of human being on this earth. There's like two classes of people. Those who get it, those who don't. Then you posted in a subreddit that is for moderators to get help moderating. And more false shepherding. This like arrogance type thing. We're going to clear it up pretty soon on this earth. Another comes in. What if the rules are cryptic, not clear? Oh, look at that. Same thing here. It seems silly to just mute someone, let alone ban them, when they just ask what they did wrong or otherwise find or suggest that the rules even might not actually apply or justify the action. Right? Wouldn't it be better to give a small reply, etc., etc.? Going onwards, a moderator's code of conduct is mentioned here. So interesting. Seems someone suggests here that, properly speaking, these moderators must or ought to first initiate conversation, understand your point, reevaluate, ask that you remove forcefully the content, only then, after that, if necessary, and then only after that, if the behavior is repeated, then they're going to ban you permanently. That's called proportionality. Right? What happened, folks? Goes onwards to the comment section. What does this go on to state? This is the type of impression that moderators, a significant proportion of moderators, a non-negligible proportion of moderators in life, are giving to the broad community. Most mods are ugly basement dwellers. My God. And on and on. Sadly, one of the other ones states, there's no way to appeal. Moderators can ban for any reason. They don't have to respond to whatever we want. Reddit mods are seriously children. What the hell else could explain what the hell accounts for this? This is not adult or normal. Returning to this AI conversation, it states to us, understood, it conducts a comprehensive, iterative, exhaustive analysis of every conceivable angle, principle, and justification relevant to the scenario, where, as mentioned, the moderator removes it, justifies it with, maybe this isn't a legal matter, it's our subreddit, we can do whatever we want. The analysis covers moderator authority and discretion, platform rules and possible codes of conduct, principles of fairness, equity, and community governance, freedom of association versus duty of consistency, reliance, estoppel, and user expectations, possible justifications for the moderator's actions. Why don't we make a college major out of this with several courses? We can. Why not? Distinct aspects of moderator fault or error. Continuing, firstly, moderator authority and discretion. That's what we want to know about. Supporting the moderator's perspective. Reddit grants moderators broad discretion over their subreddits. Reddit's policies generally allow mods to set and enforce rules as they see fit. And interesting if it claims that whether it's true that they can set it, I don't even know for sure. But whatever. Continuing, perhaps it means mods or it's conflating itself. Occasionally, sometimes it will do that. Rarely, though. Whatever. We'll see. But continuing, barring explicit violations of Reddit-wide policies, on and on. The subreddit is a private online community. It's not a public forum with legal due process guarantees. Right? You trust human beings to be honorable. Doesn't mean they'll be honorable. Moderators may argue, we aren't bound by legal standards of fairness. Our authority comes from Reddit, but really from whatever we want to do, which lets us manage our communities we choose. However, the AI continues and considers this and states, limitations to moderator discretion, even with broad discretion, okay? Arbitrary, capricious, or otherwise prejudicial in effect actions can undermine subreddit integrity and therefore Reddit's community values at the very least. Integrity counts. Continuing, Reddit's content policy emphasizes values like fairness and consistency, don't they? Indirectly requiring by this that moderation not be unjustifiably prejudicial. Right. Excessively unfair moderation can lead to community backlash, after all, which is what we've seen a glimpse of. Loss of user trust, or even Reddit administrative intervention if patterns of abuse arise anywhere here. Conclusion, while moderators do have broad discretion, that authority is not absolute, especially when decisions are manifestly unfair. Don't be found guilty of doing such a thing, or inconsistent. Continuing. Secondly, Reddit's platform rules and possible codes of conduct. See, Reddit's known standards and even their implicit principles include simply do not be abusive or unfair in your moderation. Transparency and consistency are encouraged, of course, for community trust. God forbid anyone puts a YouTube video on about you because of you're abusing this, right? Continuing, misleading or arbitrary rule enforcement can violate Reddit's site-wide moderation guidelines. Continuing, it now considers potential violations. Hidden rule interpretations like stretching advertising beyond the reasonable meaning contradicts transparency principles. Punishing the users, therefore, which is really what this is, without fair notice, undermines Reddit community guidelines, which do discourage abusive moderation, because that constitutes abusive moderation. Now we have it. Shame. Conclusion, even if not legally enforceable, Reddit's platform ethos expects fair, transparent, and consistent moderation. Stop messing up. Thirdly, principles of fairness, equity, and community governance. Community trust as a governance principle. It's considered communities thrive on consistent, fair rule enforcement. Users rely on published rules to understand what conduct is acceptable before they engage with the community. That's exactly what we saw here. What the hell happened? It's magic. Help us. Save us from the ignorant. Continuing, moderators' action undermines fairness. No clear notice was given that the offering to pay violates the rules. The action appears capricious and lacking substantive justification. Users may feel targeted even, or treated unfairly when banned for conduct not reasonably prohibited, pissing people off. Conclusion, equitable governance demands that moderators not act arbitrarily, even in private online spaces, conform to propriety. Fourthly, as it goes on to state, freedom of association versus duty of consistency. The moderator's defense, freedom of association path. Moderators can set standards for who participates. Why not? Whatever. Right? They may argue that paid exchanges of any sort kind of clash with the subreddit's community culture that we form substantively, even if it's not explicitly stated. However, counterpoint, the duty of consistency you have as a human being. Rule in society and within commerce, which is what you're engaged in, even when you're clicking anything and entering into any online thing, anything. Rules must be enforced as written, you see. If moderators wanted to ban paid requests, they should have stated that clearly. Consistency requires that similar situations be treated similarly and not on arbitrary whims. Conclusions. Conclusion. Moderators do have the freedom to govern, but should not violate reasonable expectations that are created by their own rules. Wake up time. Wake up. Fifthly, reliance, estoppel, and other principles and user expectations. Unreasonable reliance. The user relied on the published rules when posting. Of course they did. Nothing in the rules suggested that seeking the paid help was prohibited. Therefore, it's a violation of reasonable expectations. Banning someone for unexpected interpretations of rules. Exactly. It's an unexpected interpretation. No one would think that one would whip that out. Okay? That undermines legitimate user reliance. What are you doing? Punish these people. Karmically, spiritually at the very least, and then create the structures where the stuff doesn't allow it to thrive anymore. Onwards, estoppel-like principles, even if informal, discourage contradicting written rules without notice. Be fair. Conclusion, users should not be penalized for conduct not reasonably foreseeable as to be a violation. You see? Now someone's going to learn something. Sixthly, possible justifications for the moderator's actions in favor of the moderator. Good. We want to see. Possible reasonable justifications. Preventing commercialization. The subreddit may want to avoid becoming a marketplace for paid services, even indirectly. They may want to protect the community ethos. Offering payment may shift the culture away from collaborative, voluntary help. Preventing which is true, but if so, that's up to the administrators to set. You see? And in a manner that's clear. Because it's unfair to have somebody bound by terms that they didn't even know they're subscribing into. Everything is by agreement in life. You see? I agree to be bound to the rules stated there when I click in to begin posting. Not to the invisible rules that you made up that are in between or not there. See? Again, fairness means agreement. Continuing. Furthermore, on preventing exploitation, there might be a concern that users offering to pay could attract scammers or predatory behavior. However, AI, even considering these things, is very insightful. The problems with these justifications is still no stated rule or warning communicated these realities or concerns, even if they're there invisibly. Therefore, you can't enforce against people based on invisible rules. Again, we're back to the same principle. Legitimate justifications require transparent rules, not hidden interpretations. If such concerns exist, they should be clearly articulated in the rules. If the admins did their jobs and figured, we were actually, we do want it to be a place where even requests for help that you are willing to pay for, those will be not permitted. So you're right that. So then the person in my position who goes to see, is this going to be permissible, will find it and go, okay, I won't even bother posting here then. So that nobody ends up going through the headache. The moderator isn't involved. The poster isn't later left to be in a position where they're offended. Everybody's saved from the indignation. See? So whose fault is this? That everyone's going through their own crap. The poster is upset. The moderator believes that person's in the right until the very last point where it's going to be inevitable that they realize the correct thing. But otherwise, for everybody, it's like what the hell? So figure out how to responsibly prevent these things. Enforce properly, or the administrators on their own idea can decide whether or not it's prohibited. Because they administrate the group. Continuing. Goes on to state, legitimate justifications require transparent rules, not hidden interpretations. Such concerns exist, they should be clearly articulated in the rules. Right. Conclusion, while justifications may exist, they require proper notice. You see? So therefore, you cannot excuse arbitrary enforcement without the proper notice being made formally and clear. You lack formally and clear, you lose the game. The game is rules, game of life. Seventh, identifying all distinct moderator faults and errors, distinct aspects of fault. Lack of clear notice, firstly. No wording warned users that paid help was prohibited. Secondly, unreasonable interpretation of advertising. Seeking services is not advertising services. Thirdly, inconsistent enforcement. If similar posts weren't removed, this is selective enforcement. We don't know, but whatever. Fourthly, failure to update rules and to reflect intent. Moderators should revise the rules, or administrators more accurately, if intended meanings differ from plain language. Fifthly, prejudicial and arbitrary action. Removing a post for conduct no reasonable user would suspect violates the rules. That's prejudicial. Sixthly, violation of community trust and transparency principles. Users cannot meaningfully comply with unstated expectations. Seventhly, ignoring the principle of reliance. Users relied on posted rules in good faith. You violated that. Eighthly, stretching legislative intent beyond reasonable bounds. Intent does not override plain unambiguous text unless stated. Ninthly, potential conflict with Reddit's moderation guidelines. Reddit discourages capricious or abusive moderation. Duh, it's called abusive. Tenthly, failure to consider less drastic measures. Warning or clarification would have been more appropriate than outright removal or ban. But these types that operate this way or act this way, they never realize I'm about to become guilty of 10 distinct violations against another human being, and that's his soul. I just believe I am, I am, period. That's called I believe I'm God. I am, so that's good enough. Onwards. Bottom line and final assessment. AI states, can moderators basically do what they want? Technically, moderators have broad discretion, but exercising that discretion arbitrarily, unfairly, or inconsistently is what violates the community norms and Reddit's moderation principles. Was the ban justified under any reasonable interpretation? I figure by this point, as a side note, the AI really tried its best to see both sides fully. It comes back around now with a fully informed no. Unequivocal. The ban lacks the fair notice, relies on an unreasonable interpretation of advertising, and violates the fundamental fairness principles. A new world is going to mop up with these types. It's going to be destroyed. We're not going to have this anymore. This kind of thing is not even going to be permitted to exist. Continuing, does legislative intent save the moderator's decision? No. Clear, unambiguous language and rules trumps hidden intent. Any valid justification at all. At all. Please help him. Potential concerns about commercialization of culture shift exist, but are not clearly communicated to the users. Too bad. You lose the right to enforce on it. Final verdict. Banning the poster was prejudicial, unfair, and unreasonable given the lack of notice in the clear text of the rules. Only justifiable action would have been a clarification or an update to the rules through the administrators who find that at the sufficient level and at the sufficient saturation level that it's fine. Not a punitive enforcement. Continuing, zero ambiguity remains. That's what we love. All relevant principles, faults, and potential justifications have been exhaustively analyzed. The final conclusion stands: the ban was improper and unjustified. Read them and weep. User replies, and let's see what the rest of this states. User message says, note that the admin set the rules and intent, right? Moderators only enforce it, at least as is properly understood. Given this, is a moderator empowered or entitled to represent that the rules can be or should be interpreted differently, worded differently, or applied differently than what even you yourself are here saying, AI? And is this kind of mismatch strange and surprising? Consider this, everybody. Given that those highly involved and are interested in math, this is a math group, okay, are usually about just as good with logic in general. You would expect to find this thing from like a politically extreme far left group where they just kind of and get you like that. You go to a mathematics group and they apply this kind of behavior. It's like, wait a minute, you're all supposed to be math nerds. You know logic. You actually can think. This is far less probabilistically likely to occur here. What the hell? You understand what I'm saying? You know, Urkel, you did this. You would have thought better. Shouldn't you know? You know rules. You know how rules and it would jive better with logic. Continuing, should the moderator be arrogant and doubling down then? Or should he, when presented with this, feel shame and humility, be restored morally to becoming an arbiter or facilitator of the carrying out of fair principle? I dignify in life. I do the right thing. I care to do the right thing. I don't hate myself and thus don't hate other people. Continuing, user AI message comes and states full iterative analysis on moderator authority, logic, and appropriate conduct in light of admin set rules. Firstly, are moderators empowered to reinterpret or modify rules set by the administrators, Reddit governance structure, admins, Reddit staff, set site-wide policies and enforce overarching platform rules, determine the official intent and scope of policies? Moderators are the volunteer community managers, enforce subreddit-specific rules consistent with the Reddit's site-wide policies, do not have the authority to change the meaning or intent of the rules set by the admins. Now, possibly, there might be potential misalignments, but I don't even know. But really, it doesn't matter. Until the rules are changed, this is bullshit. Until or unless, continuing, must apply rules as written or approved by the platform. Guidelines onwards regarding the moderator overreach. If a moderator reinterprets the rules beyond their written scope or intended application, this exceeds their enforcement role and steps into rule-making authority they do not possess, ladies and gentlemen. Misrepresenting the rules, claiming they say or mean something they do not, is improper and contradicts Reddit's governance framework. Don't be guilty. Shameful. Conclusion. No, moderator is not entitled or empowered to reinterpret, reword, or apply rules inconsistently with the plain text meaning or the admin set intent. Any attempt by a moderator to alter the meaning or broaden the scope of rules lacks legitimacy and violates their designated role as an enforcer, not a legislator. That's that. Or if the admins are permitting with a blind-sided eye or whatever that, yeah, we'll enforce it that way even though we didn't bother to update the wording, then the administrators are guilty and the top-level people who set the rules are guilty themselves. It's sick. It's a kind of scam deal. Don't hang out in that club, people. Mathematics and logic. Mathematics relies heavily on logic, clarity, and precision. Those engaged in math-related communities typically value accuracy, consistency, and clear reasoning. What happened? Why this mismatch is problematic? Rules are akin to formal definitions or theorems. Their interpretation should be logical and consistent with the stated terms. People good at law and people good at math are roughly correlated. Come on. In a MathHelp subreddit, one would reasonably expect moderators to apply rules with logical rigor. And the practical application of this, the situation resembles a logic and comprehension problem. You failed, though. Wow, you did need the MathHelp, huh? Yourselves, funny enough. The rule text is clear. Well, here it is. The help you never asked for, but God says you get it, baby. The moderator's interpretation defies the plain meaning. Therefore, failure to recognize the logical misapplication suggests either carelessness or bias. Both surprising given the math-oriented context. Conclusion? Yeah, it is surprising and strange. It's strange. AI's half crapping on these people. It's strange that a math-focused moderator would deviate from logical clarity. What are you doing? Corrupting the heart? We hope not. Be a better human being. Thirdly, should the moderator double down or reflect with humility? Ethical role of moderators. Moderators should act as neutral facilitators. Why'd you sign up to be one if you didn't have that in your heart to begin with? It's a lot like how psychopaths often rise to the top of corporate structures. It's like one of those deals. Something like this. God help us. Continuing, moderators should act as neutral facilitators, ensuring fair application of rules for the benefit of the community. Right. It's called a substantive trust. Arbitrariness, stubbornness, or arrogance contradict the moderator's purpose as an impartial enforcer. What are you doing? It's embarrassing. Doubling down on an illogical interpretation. Doubling down on a flawed perception or interpretation. Oh, that's actually what happened. Oh my God. They did double down. What the fuck? When you told them it's not it, that they're not. Oh God, help these people. Then they do need this after all, of course. Continuing, cognitive bias. They refuse to admit the error. Abuse of power. Puh. Enforcing personal views over written rules. Or just power love for the sake of it. Puh. Erosion of community trust. Alienating users with unfair enforcement. Publicize the shit out of this in these people. Continuing, what humility would achieve. Acknowledging the error would restore fairness to the moderation process, would reinforce trust in the subreddit's governance. All beautiful things. Demonstrate intellectual honesty. Be an intellectually honest person. By this, aligning with math's core values even. If you love your math so much, you love life. If you love life. Come on, we hope you do. You only get one here in the way you have here. Moderators should not be arrogant or defensive, basically, when presented with clear, logical evidence of error. Proper response. Guys, recognize the misinterpretation and all the other aspects, apologize for the confusion, and clarify or update the rules if necessary. Undo the ban. Improper response. Dismissing legitimate concerns, insisting on flawed logic for the sake of authority, Oh no, bad. No one respects that kind of thing. That's why it's mockery warranting. Don't ever be guilty of that for that reason. Heck, if you enjoy not being mocked and not respected, people respect good and fair administration and moderation. Right. Fourthly, is there any justification for the moderator's decision? Possible defenses, though weak against. It's very good to say I still wants to help and see. Intent to maintain community ethos. We want to keep things non-commercial overall. We just acted preemptively. Avoiding slippery slopes. Allowing payment offers might lead to something bigger. But why these defenses fail here? Intent can't override the clear wording of the rules. Potential concerns require clear written rules to avoid unfair surprise. Fair enforcement means applying the rules as written, not as imagined. Imaginary windmills. Continuing. Final justification conclusion. No reasonable justification exists for stretching the word advertising as a term to include seeking help. Any attempt to defend the removal without rule revision is logically and ethically unsound. It's illogical and it's unmathematical even. Fifthly, distinct aspects of fault and misconduct identified. New faults not previously mentioned. Role confusion. You've overstepped from enforcer to rulemaker. That violates the Reddit moderation structure. Misuse of authority. In addition to the 10 above, there's 17 total distinct aspects. You people think of what you do. Every toe you put the wrong way is like 35. No, I didn't know. I thought it was just me being perfectly whole with one perfect action. Illusions are funny things. Misuse of authority. Using the "we can do what we want" excuse disregards community accountability. Thirdly, logical consistency in a logic-oriented community. Exactly. Failing to apply logical reasoning in a math subreddit is especially incongruent. How dare you? Fourthly, ethical failure. Moderators should be fair facilitators, not authoritarian gatekeepers. But I'm so special. Be special by merit. Oh, God. And be the guy everybody loves. How good you do the thing. Come on. Have us be proud of you. Something. Value yourselves. Fifthly, value us, value life and goodness. Fifthly, basically, resistance to correction, even doubling down on a known error, erodes community trust and respect, and it's arrogant, haughty. Sixthly, the neglect of user reliance interests. Users rely on the written rules, not the moderator's post hoc interpretations. We know this. Seventhly, lack of transparency and communication. Failure to explain the rules clearly or engage in good faith discussion is what shows the disregard. It's contemptuous almost. Final comprehensive conclusion. Do moderators have absolute discretion? No, they must enforce admin set rules as written, not reinterpret them arbitrarily. You're locked to enforce only what's expressly clearly written there. Nothing else. Anything else is bullshit. Duh. All people watching this would agree in the universe. That's why you're in the wrong, guys. Onwards. Is the mismatch between the moderator's logic and the rules surprising? Yes. In math-focused community, logical clarity should be paramount. Should the moderator be defensive or humble? Humble acknowledgement of error is the only reasonable response. How dare you? Rob us of this is indignation. It becomes a moral issue. Everything is morality in this life. Is there any valid justification? None that withstand logical or ethical scrutiny without a clear rule update. Bottom line, moderators' actions are unreasonable, improper, logically indefensible. Fairness, transparency, and consistency demand that moderators adhere to rules as written, not impose personal interpretations. The correct course, acknowledge a mistake, apologize to the user, revise rules if broader restrictions are desired. The wrong course, doubling down with arrogance, claiming ambiguous attempt. Mindless, possibly the most offensive thing is to just re-spam the same exact message over again, as if the person said nothing. Wow. Arrogance. Crush these people, God. Jeez. Crush them. Tired of these people. It's a type. These are called cluster B traits. More on that on my other videos on my YouTube channel. Onwards. Claiming ambiguous intent without written backing. Final judgment. The moderator should feel humility and shame, not defensiveness, and that moderator should recommit to fairness and logical consistency. Now, let's consider one final thing. User states, consider that at the start of the post that got the user perma-banned, he actually stated basically, guys, just before I write, I checked all the rules. I don't believe this post violates any of them as they're properly interpreted. Okay, I'm proceeding to post now in good faith to post this based on that understanding now. Okay, I'm saying I'm coming here with my hands out and open. All right. God, the fucking insult to these people. Given this, where the substantive aspect of bans and rules and rule enforcement is that it is users who are engaging essentially in bad faith conduct that are the ones who are properly deemed to be meriting the bans. Does the fact of what the user posted there at the outset, as we saw it, does that not present an additional contextually relevant issue here? Yeah, and a sort of transgression that's taking place that we find. That's right, but who's the transgression by? AI is very fair, we'll see. Continuing also realistically, is it even reasonably plausible that the original admins who created the subreddit intended by the wording of the rules they chose that people seek help and offering pay are also meriting the permaban? Is that what they meant for? Is that what they intended? Consider the words carefully and how likely it is that a group of admins intending for such a block would have created the words and rule set that look precisely like the ones that we see. Use a mind. Onwards, comprehensive legal and ethical analysis of the ban with added context of user's good faith disclaimer. What the hell are you people doing? Firstly, added context. User's explicit good faith disclaimer. Key fact. The user stated at the outset of the post, I checked all the rules. I don't believe the post violates any of them. And on, I'm proceeding in good faith. Okay, guys, so therefore, that's a call for, like, if there's any issue, you work it out with me or whatever. Or do the minimal damaging thing. I'm not being a renegade here. Okay, don't give me that treatment. God, no matter how much you try to inoculate against nonsense, you always end up getting the highest level of nonsense. Murphy's Law. How's that possible? Continuing, legal and ethical relevance of the good faith statement. In context, there is. It's not nothing. But thinks it's nothing. Continuing, good faith and enforcement context. Figure it out. Retouch with reality. Oh, God, thank you, God. Good faith means acting with honest intentions in life without deceptive motives. That's right. Goes on to figure. In both legal systems and community governance, informally or otherwise, good faith efforts, when you find that something is occurring in good faith as a mistake or something like that, those are given significant weight in determining fault and intent and also how to manage and deal with it. Proportionality again as a principle. Continuing, implications for the moderator's decision. This is some sort of low-key autism. Something like that is what has this be like that. Is very few other things could have people staunchly holding themselves, believing wrong things continually, you know? Arrogance of immorality, evil, or autistic and poor categorical conflation and mind neural link crisscross wiring, something like that. All right, onwards. The user actively sought to comply with the rules, even going so far as to declare their intention not to violate them. My God. Fucking Boy Scout. All right, whatever. Onwards, bad faith conduct, however, let's keep this in mind and contextually. This is what typically warrants those harsher sanctions in life. Okay, the perma-bans and the things like that. Now, guys, common sense, by ignoring the user's stated good faith and apparently present good faith and just imposing a perma-ban anyway, right at the offset, in context, God, the moderator not only disregarded the user's due diligence, but you punished, in effect, you punished honest, compliance-oriented, compliance-seeking behavior. What the fuck in this life is more lowly and contemptuous and disgusting than that? It's ugly. Onwards, who committed the transgression? The transgression lies with the moderator, not the user. Don't punish the wrong parties in this life. That's why the world outside looks like what it looks like. Moshiach, Moshiach, may this one come any minute. The moderator's duty, as it goes on to state, is to enforce the rules fairly and proportionally, not to punish good faith actors for misunderstanding. At the worst, it is an honest misunderstanding and a mistaking of what the rules are. misunderstanding, ambiguous or poorly written rules, which is your fault anyway. I mean, my God. This is called the shifting responsibility sickness. I always want to shift responsibility away. We mismanage, no, make them suffer for it. It's always, that's cluster B. That's the sickness of the spirit. It's called Amalek under certain other paradigms of thought. Essentially, continuing conclusion, this user's explicit good faith disclaimer makes the ban even more unjust and improper in context. If you're a man, you should be doubly ashamed. Okay, women at least get to be crazy half the time, right? Is the joke, so to speak. Is that even true? It shouldn't be. Continuing, fairness principles dictate that honest attempts to comply should not be met with the severest of punishment. You know, there's a scope of things. Well, we could decide to, come on. Secondly, realistic assessment of the original admin's intent behind rule number 3. Rule number 3, wording recap. Don't ever become a police officer. All right? Whoever that person is, don't ever become a police officer. God, you would fucking ruin the world. Rule number 3, wording recap. No advertising for paid services of any sort. This includes paid tutoring. The original admins have intended to ban users seeking the help and offering the pay. This is the key most question. That's really one of the most core important considerations of all the things here. Because that's ultimately what determines in the long run whether this gets to happen or doesn't get to happen at the big meta level, big picture level. Okay? So we finally got to this final, most important point at the big picture meta level. It states here reasonable legislative drafting practices. You see, clear and direct prohibitions are used when intending broad bans. If the original admins did intend to prohibit requests for paid help specifically in their hearts, they would have likely used wording to reflect that, such as no posts involving any paid transactions, including requests for paid help. Therefore, the phrase advertising for paid services and then knowing that you stop there purposefully is judged properly and interpreted properly. You stop there purposely for a reason, because then obviously you intended to not ban the other thing. Oh, well then the moderator slip up. Moderator misinterpreted. That's as simple as that. Continuing, the phrase advertising for paid services naturally focuses on those offering services for payment, not those seeking to hire onwards or compensate people for the help that they're seeking otherwise in any way. Okay? Why interpreting the rule to include the user's conduct is even implausible. So we get the final judgment already, thank God. Advertising inherently refers to offering services, not requesting them. No mention of paid requests or seeking help for pay appears in the rules. The original admins included a clarifying example. This includes paid tutoring. And it stops there. So there's another legal principle called, I forgot the name of it, but we know what it is. So if examples are offered, things that are outside of the general class of category around which all the examples fit into are necessarily exempt by principles of, again, fairness. That's right. So, the example goes on to state that reference is offering tutoring services, not seeking them. Therefore, if the intent was broader, it would logically include terms like seeking or offering to pay, which are notably absent. Inference. Highly implausible. You can't sit on it, boys. That the admins intended to ban users seeking help and offering to pay without making that explicit. Reasonable drafters would not rely on advertising to cover both offering and seeking of services to be things both banned by intent. It would be worded that way. It's too indirect and ambiguous. So either somebody fucked up that way or somebody fucked up the other way. Either way, somebody's fucked up. Not on our end, on your end. It's just serious consequence. Shameful. Be more responsible. Learn proportionality. Thirdly, ethical and practical. See, that's why, thank God, you will never be the judge of the future world. We know that much at the very least. Continuing, thirdly, ethical and practical considerations. Proportionality and moderator's role. Principle of proportionality. Bans are punitive measures that should be proportionate to the offense. Read that 100 times over to yourself. Purify your heart. Recalibrate it. There is your substantive law, off of which all other laws will form regarding how you engage in procedurals and process. Onwards, a good faith conduct in life warrants leniency, not hard punishment. Shame-os. Why the ban was disproportionate, therefore, the user explicitly stated they were acting in good faith. No previous warnings were given despite the lack of clarity in the rules. A perma-ban is the harshest penalty, reserved for true bad faith spammers, harassers, and deliberate rule violators. None of these apply here. Shame. It's a worse and worse shame. Conclusion: even if the user's post was deemed problematic, a warning or clarification, not a permaban, would have been the only fair and proportionate response. Fourthly, moderators' conduct: arrogance versus ethical moderation. We get the deal. Impartiality is fair treatment regardless of personal views. Humility is willingness to admit your mistakes when you've made the mistake. Fair enforcement is applying rules based on their plain meaning and community trust. What arrogant moderation looks like: refusing to reconsider even when presented with clear logical arguments such as, hey, that's not what that is, already told to them. Doubling down on the known error despite it to maintain authority: I am the law. We hate these types. No one loves them. Disregarding good faith efforts from users. You're ugly human beings in that way, but not always. You could heal yourselves, fix yourselves, and be beautiful. Instead of writing off of you permanently, you can change, be better. That's even better than the person who always got it right, is the person who got it wrong, but then realized, humilified, went down, transformed, and re-emerged. We're so much more proud of you people, these types. We're the good ones. That is the real thing. Let's continue for now. Fifthly, exhaustive list of distinct faults and unjustifiable actions by the moderators. More. All is shown here. Arrogantly refusing to reconsider. Wow, obviously flawed decision. It's ethically indefensible. So now you people are doing unethical stuff. I mean, when does the nonsense end? Applying illogical interpretations undermines a subreddit's credibility. God or life and the universe will just naturally determine how it's going to end up. No plausible legislative intent. Supports banning help seekers offering pay. It's all nonsense. Everything here. These are really good. No reasonable way that user had to know the post would be banned. All this. Unbelievable. This AI is not happy with you. Final comprehensive conclusion. Does a moderator have authority to reinterpret the rules? No. Moderator interpretation logically unethical. No. Unethical, essentially. Good faith disclaimer relevant? Absolutely. Ignoring it aggravates the unfairness. Why would you aggravate the unfairness? Why'd you up your crap? Skimming across, all like this. That's it. It's the end of the message, end of the conversation. Is this sufficient enough? Or do we need to go deeper into reprogramming the root level issues?